Have you ever been in a situation where your own husband robs you of everything, only to hand you the wedding invitation to his marriage with another woman? I once thought divorce was the final punctuation mark on a mistaken marriage. But I was wrong. The day I walked out of the courthouse, empty-handed and broken-hearted, the man I had spent the entirety of my youth loving smiled and tossed a crimson-red invitation in my face. On it were his name and the name of the woman who had crept into our lives for the past 2 years. And the $15 million mansion I once called home was now in his name alone. I thought I had lost everything. Until my father looked at me and said just one thing: don't cry. Just go to the party. There's going to be a show. I didn't understand then, but after that night, I learned that some falls aren't the end, but the beginning of a reckoning that would make the betrayer regret it for the rest of his life. That afternoon, the city sky was a bleak, uniform gray, as if someone had washed a layer of smoke over everything, casting a sad pallor on the world. The rain wasn't heavy, just a persistent drizzle, but it was enough to make the street in front of the county courthouse slick and cold. Cars glided past in a long, endless procession, their headlights reflecting on the wet asphalt, like blurry streaks of light, a perfect mirror of my state of mind, chaotic, exhausted, and so hollow I could no longer feel anything clearly. I stood silently under the courthouse portico, still clutching the sheaf of divorce papers I had just signed and hadn't yet put away. The papers were thin, but they felt like a razor-sharp knife that had sliced away 11 years of my youth with a few cold strokes of a pen. The wind blew, making the hem of my coat flutter, but my body was as rigid as a stone statue. 11 years. For 11 years, I had loved one man, trusted one man, lived for one man. And today, I walked out of this place with nothing, no home, no husband, nothing that could be called a family. I let out a laugh, a dry, hollow sound that felt foreign even to me. Just then, a short, sharp honk sounded in front of me. I lifted my head. The familiar black Mercedes was parked right at the curb, sleek and cold. The car door opened, and Julian Vance stepped out. He was, as always, immaculate. A crisp white shirt, an expensive watch on his wrist, his hair perfectly coiffed, his handsome face the same one I had once been so proud of. But today, all of it just made me feel sick to my stomach. Beside him, another woman emerged. She wore a form-fitting cream-colored dress, her figure slender, her makeup subtle but sharp, her soft, wavy hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her red lips curved into a faint smile, the smile of a victor. Isabel Reed, the woman who had been sleeping with my husband for 2 years, right behind my back. The two of them stood side by side, looking for all the world like the perfect couple. And I stood there, under the damp portico, an outsider in my own life. I was about to turn away, but his voice, soft as a whisper but cold as a blade, called out, "Eleanor." I froze. I don't know why, but just that one familiar word still sent a pang through my heart, even as my mind screamed that this man was no longer worthy. I turned back and looked him straight in the eye. "Is there anything else? Or have you not done enough?" Julian didn't get angry. He just curled his lip in a faint, dismissive smile, as if everything that had just happened was a perfectly normal affair. He approached me, his movements as smooth as if he were meeting a business partner. I thought we should end things properly. With that, he pulled a red envelope from his jacket pocket, a glaring, crimson red that felt completely out of place in the gray, rainy afternoon. He held it out to me. "For you." I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding like a hammer against my ribs. "What is this?" "Open it." I didn't want to touch it. My intuition screamed that whatever was inside would hurt more than anything I had already endured. But my hand moved anyway. I opened it. It was a wedding invitation, on thick, gold-embossed cardstock, luxurious to the point of perfection. And right in the center, 2 names were printed in elegant script: Julian Vance and Isabel Reed. A roar filled my ears. All the sounds around me, the falling rain, the passing cars, the distant chatter faded into a muffled hum, as if I were standing at the bottom of a pool. I looked up. Julian was watching me, his expression placid, almost cruel. 10 days from now. Come celebrate with us." Behind him, Isabel stepped forward, her voice as smooth as honey. "Don't be sad, Eleanor. You can't predict things like love. Julian and I, it was destiny." Destiny. The word was a slap in the face. I looked at her, the words forced from my throat. "You call it destiny? Or forcing your way into someone else's family?" The smile on Isabel's face tightened for a second, but she quickly regained her look of feigned gentleness. You can think whatever you like, but the one who gets to be with Julian is me. I clenched the invitation so tightly the edges dug into my palm. Julian finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. Eleanor, you should accept reality. You've lost. Lost. I laughed, my voice trembling. You had an affair. You tricked me into signing the papers. You took all our assets. And you're telling me I lost? He shrugged. In this life, the smart ones win. You were just too trusting. I looked at him. The man I had once loved blindly. The man I thought would hold my hand for the rest of my life. He was nothing but a cold, calculating monster. A man who had planned everything for a long time, from the affair and the asset transfer to this very day, standing before me, handing me a wedding invitation like a final kick. I said nothing more. I threw the invitation at his chest. Keep it and invite someone else. But Julian didn't get angry. He bent down, picked it up, brushed it off, and pushed it back into my hand. His eyes were sharp and cold. Take it. You should be there. I trembled, not from weakness, but from suffocating rage. At that moment, my phone vibrated. The screen lit up with 2 words, Dad. I turned and walked quickly to my car, slamming the door shut. And for the first time in days, I broke down, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. Why? Why me? I mumbled, tears streaming uncontrollably. I answered the phone. Dad, my voice cracked. It's done. I've lost everything. The other end was silent for a few seconds. Then, my father's voice came through. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rushed. But it was as solid as steel. Don't cry. I choked back a sob. Dad. He took the house. He even gave me his wedding invitation. Another pause. Then my father asked, when is it? What? Oh, next Saturday night. All right. I don't understand, Dad. His voice deepened, each word distinct. Just go to the party. I was stunned. What did you say? He added only one more sentence. The sentence that would change everything that was to come. There's going to be a show. I froze, the tears still falling. But for the first time, something inside me began to shift. That night, I didn't sleep. The small studio apartment I'd hastily rented was on the 3rd floor of an old, weathered building. The dim yellow light cast shadows on the peeling walls. The sound of rain pattered on the fire escape, each drop hitting the metal with a mournful, hollow sound. I sat on the bed, knees hugged to my chest, my hands still gripping the now crinkled wedding invitation. 10 days. In just 10 days, the man I once called my husband would be in a tuxedo, standing before a crowd, taking another woman's hand, and walking down the aisle. And me? I had nothing left. No home, no title, no place to return to. I laughed, and the tears fell again. But just then, my father's words echoed in my head. Don't cry. There's going to be a show. A show. I closed my eyes. My father never spoke in empty phrases. His entire life, he was the type of man whose silence was more intimidating than any threat. To outsiders, he was just a quiet, reserved older man. But anyone who had done business with him knew that when he made a move, no one saw it coming. But this wasn't a business deal. This was his daughter. The next morning, I went to my father's house. The old house was on a quiet, tree-lined street, a world away from the lavish gated community I had once lived in. But stepping inside, I realized this was my real home. My father was already in the sunroom, drinking tea. The morning light slanted through the canopy of an old oak tree, dappling the stone table in front of him. He was wearing an old polo shirt, holding a teacup, his expression as calm as if nothing had happened. When I walked in, he simply glanced up, no questions, no condolences, just one sentence. Have you had breakfast? I stood there, and tears welled up again. Dad. He set his teacup down. Sit. I sat across from him, my hands trembling, not knowing where to begin. My father looked at me for a long time before speaking slowly. Have you cried enough? I bit my lip. Crying more won't get you anything back. I fell silent. He was right. Crying solved nothing. He pushed a folder across the table toward me. Read this. I wiped my tears and opened it. The very first page made me freeze. It was the purchase and sale agreement for the $15 million mansion. Dad, this. My father took a sip of tea, his voice even. Did you really think that house belonged to Julian? I jerked my head up. It doesn't? The deed is entirely in his name. My father gave a faint, cold smile, the kind I'd seen right before someone was about to have a very bad day. You're still so naive. My heart pounded. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away. He just turned a few more pages in the file, stopping at one particular document. Read this line carefully. I leaned in. It was an addendum to the contract. But one line made me go numb. Source of supplemental capital. A personal investment from Mr. Arthur Peterson. I looked up, my eyes wide. Dad? This was your money? I could barely breathe. But I thought you gave it to us as a gift. He looked at me, his eyes sharp. I gave you a life, Eleanor. That doesn't mean I'd let someone else steal it. I was shaking. So that means. My father leaned forward, his voice low. That mansion was never completely his. A jolt ran down my spine. But the paperwork is what people see. He tapped his finger on the table. What really matters is what's behind the paperwork. I was starting to understand, but didn't dare to believe it. Dad, what are you going to do? He looked me straight in the eye, and his gaze was no longer that of an ordinary father, but of a man who had everything prepared. You just go to the wedding. My heart tightened. And then what? He smirked. A good show is always more fun with a large audience. I swallowed hard. Dad, how long have you been planning this? He didn't answer, but said one thing that sent a chill down my spine. From the day you brought him home to meet me. I was speechless. Dad, you knew he would be like this? He shook his head. I didn't know, but I know his type. Sooner or later, they all show their true colors. Silence filled the room. I looked at the man before me. For the first time in my life, I felt profoundly lucky to be his daughter. When I left my father's house that afternoon, the rain had stopped. The sky was a little clearer, but my heart was completely different. I was no longer the betrayed woman who had lost everything. I was waiting for the wedding day, waiting for the tables to turn. Elsewhere, Julian was probably busy preparing for his dream wedding. He didn't know, and Isabel didn't know, that the wedding invitation he'd thrown in my face would be their one-way ticket to a nightmare they would never forget. That night, the $15 million mansion was ablaze with light. Warm, golden light spilled from the large glass windows, reflecting on the surface of the small infinity pool out front, shimmering like a luxurious dream so many people yearned for. In the living room, the old sofas had been replaced with a newer, brighter set. The curtains had been swapped for expensive imported fabrics. Everything bore a new touch. The touch of another woman. Isabel stood in the middle of the living room, turning slowly, a satisfied smile on her face. It's beautiful. A completely different class from my old apartment. She walked over and touched the marble coffee table, then surveyed the house as if inspecting a new purchase. See, Julian? All it took was a few of my adjustments, and it's completely transformed. Julian stood behind her, hands in his pockets, his eyes also sweeping across the familiar space that now felt so different. There was no trace of me, none of the things I had chosen, nothing left of the past. He smirked. Yeah, now, it finally feels like our home. Isabel turned back, her smile sweet. I told you, I'm going to replace everything that was hers. A seemingly light comment, but it was like a knife severing all the memories that had ever existed in this house. Julian stepped forward, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. No rush. We can renovate the whole place after the wedding. Isabel leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice a coquettish purr. I just want to get rid of everything related to her as soon as possible. It's annoying seeing it everywhere. Julian chuckled. Don't worry. From now on, it's only you here. Outside, the wind began to pick up. The trees in the yard rustled, their leaves whispering against each other. The air suddenly felt a bit colder, even though the lights inside were bright. Isabel shivered slightly. Do you feel a chill? It's just your imagination. Julian let her go and walked to the bar to pour 2 glasses of wine. Have a drink. It's our first official night in our new home. Isabel took the glass, but her eyes unconsciously darted toward the door. For some reason, she felt a sense of unease, as if the house itself didn't welcome her. Around 10 p.m., just as they had settled onto the sofa, a sharp knock echoed through the house. Knock, knock, knock. They both jumped. Isabel slammed her wine glass down on the table. Who could that be at this hour? Julian frowned. I don't know. The knocking came again, slow and steady. Not rushed, but it sent a chill down the spine of anyone who heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Julian stood up. I'll get it. Isabel grabbed his arm. Julian, this feels strange. It's so late. It's probably security. Julian gently removed her hand and walked to the door. The large wooden door swung open. A man stood on the doorstep, around 50, dressed in a dark suit and carrying a briefcase. His face was calm, but his eyes were cold. "Who are you?" Julian asked, his tone annoyed. The man didn't answer immediately. He looked Julian straight in the eye, and then said slowly, "Are you the owner of this house?" Julian's brow furrowed. "Yes. What's this about?" The man nodded slightly. "Good." He then opened his briefcase and took out a folder. "Then let's have a little chat." Julian was growing impatient. "It's not a good time. Come back tomorrow." "This matter," the man interrupted, "concerns the ownership of this mansion." The air instantly froze. Isabel, standing behind them, felt her heart pound. "What? What did you say?" The man held out the folder. "Please, have a look." Julian took it. Just a few seconds later, his expression changed, shifting from annoyance to surprise, and then to a deathly pale. "What is this?" he rasped. The man replied calmly, "A confirmation of asset interest and financial obligations related to the initial investment." Isabel rushed forward and snatched the papers. "Let me see." She flipped through the pages quickly, then stopped, her eyes wide. Impossible. On the paper, a name was printed clearly: Arthur Peterson. The man standing before them spoke slowly. "I'm sure you both are aware that this house isn't as simple as you think." Julian clenched the folder. "Who are you?" The man looked directly at him, his voice low and clear. "I am the legal representative for Mr. Arthur Peterson." An icy chill shot down Julian's spine. Isabel took a step back. "No, that's not possible. The deed is in Julian's name." The lawyer gave a small, humorless smile. "Having your name on the title doesn't mean you have full ownership." He closed his briefcase. "We will be sending a formal notice shortly." He turned to leave, but paused for a second and added, "Oh, and by the way," he looked straight at Julian, "your wedding should be quite interesting." The door closed, leaving behind a terrifying silence. Julian stood frozen in the middle of the living room. Isabel trembled. "Julian, what is going on?" Julian didn't answer, because for the first time, he realized that things might not be as firmly in his control as he had thought. Elsewhere, I sat in my small apartment, looking out the window. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. "The show has begun." I clutched my phone, my heart racing, and for the first time, I smiled. The next morning, the $15 million mansion was no longer quiet. The air was so heavy you could hear the echo of a single footstep. Julian sat alone in the living room. The file from the lawyer spread out before him. The morning sun streamed through the large windows, but it did nothing to warm the room. He had read it all 3 times, and with each reading, his hands grew colder. "Impossible," he muttered. "This can't be happening." The door burst open, and Isabel came down the stairs, her face still pale. "Julian, I couldn't sleep all night." Julian didn't respond. He continued to stare at the papers as if trying to see through them. Isabel came closer, her voice urgent. "Say something. Who was that lawyer? Why is her father's name on this?" Julian slammed his hand on the table. "I'm thinking," he snarled, making Isabel flinch. She bit her lip but didn't dare say another word. After a long moment, Julian shot up from his seat and grabbed his phone. "Mr. Evans, I need to see you. Now. It's an emergency." After a brief exchange, he hung up and turned to Isabel. "I'm going to see my lawyer. I'll come with you." "No need," he snapped. "Stay here." The front door slammed shut. Isabel was left alone in the vast living room. For the first time, the house no longer seemed beautiful to her. It only felt cold. The coffee shop where Julian met his lawyer was on a high floor, overlooking the entire city. But today, he was in no mood to admire the view. "You've seen it," Julian said, skipping the pleasantries. The man, Mr. Evans, his personal attorney, placed the file on the table, his expression grim. "I have." Julian looked at him squarely. "Tell me straight. How much trouble am I in?" The lawyer sighed. "A lot of trouble." Julian's heart hammered against his chest. "How much is a lot?" Mr. Evans adjusted his glasses, his voice low. "If these documents are authentic, then that mansion is not your personal property." Julian let out a bitter laugh. "Are you kidding me? The title is in my name." "True." The lawyer nodded, then tapped the table. "But there was a substantial investment from Arthur Peterson, your former father-in-law. And that investment was not a gift." Julian froze. "Meaning?" "Meaning he has the legal right to demand a division of the asset." or even file for an asset seizure if he can prove any sign of misappropriation or fraud. The coffee cup in front of Julian trembled along with his hand. Impossible. The lawyer looked at him directly. Did you sign any documents without reading them carefully? Julian was silent. A memory flashed in his mind. The times Eleanor had brought him papers to sign, the rushed completions of paperwork, the times he had thought everything was under his control. Now, it all felt like a trap. Julian clenched his fists. So, am I going to lose the house? The lawyer didn't answer immediately. He only said, if the other party plays hardball, you won't just lose the house. Julian's head shot up. What else? You could be tied up in protracted litigation. And if they prove you intentionally made fraudulent asset transfers. He paused. You'll be in much bigger trouble. The air felt thick, suffocating. Julian sat motionless, a cold sweat breaking out on his back. That afternoon, Julian returned to the mansion. Isabel rushed to him. What happened? Julian threw the file on the table. It's a mess. What kind of mess? He didn't answer right away. He paced the room, then stopped in front of the large glass window. We might not be able to keep this house. Isabel looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. What? Shut up, Julian snapped. She recoiled, her eyes turning red. What do you mean? We can't keep it. This is our house. Julian spun around, his eyes filled with frustration. You think it's that simple? Eleanor's father planned this from the start. Isabel shook her head in panic. No, I've already told my friends, my family, that we'd be living here after the wedding. Julian closed his eyes, trying to stay calm. It's not a sure thing yet. But what if we do lose it? Isabel nearly screamed. Where will I live? What did you promise me? The tension was palpable. Julian looked at her, and for the first time, his gaze wasn't gentle, but filled with irritation. Can you stop being so dramatic? That sentence made Isabel freeze. What? What did you say? I said calm down, Julian growled. Nothing is certain yet. Isabel scoffed, tears welling up. Unbelievable. When you needed me, you said you loved me. Now that there's a problem, you tell me I'm being dramatic. Julian turned away, not wanting to argue. But in that moment, the first crack appeared between them. 3 days later, the wedding invitations had all been sent. The hotel was booked, the decorations were complete, and the guest list was filled with prominent people. Everything was proceeding as planned. But only Julian knew that the ground beneath his feet was shaking. The night before the wedding, Julian stood alone in his study, looking down at the glittering city lights. His phone buzzed. An unknown number, no name, just a single line of text. Don't think you can keep everything. Julian gripped his phone tightly. Who is this? There was no reply. Elsewhere, I sat in front of a mirror, trying on a simple dress my father had just bought for me. It wasn't a gown, not glamorous, but it was elegant. I looked at my reflection. This was no longer the weak woman from a few days ago. My phone lit up. A text from my father. Tomorrow, just watch. I smiled. For the first time, I was looking forward to that wedding. On Saturday night, the city's grandest five-star hotel glittered like a palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting a golden glow over the ballroom. The tables were lavishly decorated with large arrangements of imported fresh flowers. A red carpet stretched from the entrance to the main stage. The guests arrived in droves: businessmen, partners, friends, acquaintances, all dressed in their finest, holding glasses of champagne and chatting animatedly. I hear the groom is very successful. A multi-million-dollar mansion, you know. The bride is stunning, too. A perfect match. Words of praise filled the air. No one knew that tonight would be no ordinary wedding. In the bridal suite, Isabel stood before a mirror, draped in a pristine white wedding gown, sparkling with crystals from shoulder to hem. Her hair was elaborately styled, her makeup flawless. She smiled. The day had finally come. You look beautiful, ma'am. Like a princess, the makeup artist praised. Isabel tilted her head, her eyes filled with satisfaction. I have to be beautiful. This is the day I start my new life. A new life. A life she had schemed and fought for over 2 years. A life she believed she had won. In another room, Julian adjusted his bow tie in the mirror. His expensive tuxedo fit him perfectly. His face was as handsome as ever, but his eyes were different. Beneath the calm exterior was a gnawing anxiety. He remembered last night's text. Don't think you can keep everything. He clenched his fists. It's nothing. Just a threat. He tried to reassure himself. Once the wedding is over, everything will be fine. But deep down, the sense of dread wouldn't go away. I walked into the ballroom. My simple black dress hugged my body lightly. It wasn't flashy, but it made me look completely different from the fragile woman I had been. My gaze was calm. No more pain. No more panic. Only anticipation. Many people recognized me. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Is that his ex-wife? Why is she here? How bold. I didn't care. I walked straight in. In another corner of the hall, my father was already seated. He wore a simple suit, but his presence still commanded respect. In front of him was a cup of tea, not wine. He saw me and gave a slight nod, saying nothing. But I understood. It was time. The wedding march began. The grand doors opened. Julian stood on the stage, a perfect smile on his face. Isabel made her entrance, holding a bouquet, her magnificent white train trailing behind her. The guests applauded, the music swelled, and the air was thick with feigned happiness. They stood facing each other. The officiant began. And now, for the sacred moment when the bride and groom will exchange rings. Julian picked up the ring. Isabel held out her hand, her eyes shining. In just a few more seconds, it would all be official. And at that exact moment, stop. A voice cut through the hall from the back. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to silence the entire room. Everyone turned. A group of men in suits walked in. Leading them was the lawyer from that night. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Julian froze. Isabel's face went pale. What's happening? The lawyer strode to the front, his voice clear. My apologies for the interruption, but we have an announcement to make right here, right now. The flustered officiant asked, Sir, who are you? This is a wedding. We are legal representatives. He held up a file. This concerns the assets registered under the name of Mr. Julian Vance. The entire hall erupted in murmurs. Julian stepped forward, his voice sharp. What do you think you're doing? This is my wedding. The lawyer looked him dead in the eye. That's precisely why we chose this moment. Isabel panicked. Julian, what is this? The lawyer opened the file, his voice booming, each word seeming to freeze the air. The $15 million mansion is currently under legal dispute, and upon the request of Mr. Arthur Peterson. He paused for a second, then continued. We are initiating proceedings to freeze the asset, effective immediately. The ballroom exploded. What? Freeze his assets? What kind of wedding is this? Julian stood there, stunned. No, that's impossible. Isabel was shaking. Say something, Julian. The lawyer continued. And that's not all. He turned a page. We also have evidence of fraudulent asset transfers during the period of his previous marriage. Julian's face was as white as a sheet. You're slandering me. The lawyer didn't smile. He just said one thing. We have all the evidence. The air was suffocating. And at that moment, a deep voice rose from the audience. The evidence is me. Everyone turned. My father stood up. Step by step, he walked towards the stage, his eyes like ice. Julian looked at him as if seeing a ghost. Mr. Peterson. My father stopped in front of him. No slap, no yelling. Just one question. Is this show dramatic enough for you? The entire hall fell silent, and I stood in the audience, watching it all unfold. And for the first time, I felt justice beginning to dawn. The air in the ballroom had solidified. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were fixed on the stage. The music was gone, the laughter silenced, replaced by a suffocating tension. Julian stood there, the wedding ring still in his hand, his face a ghostly white. Mr. Peterson, there must be some misunderstanding, he stammered, trying to keep his voice steady, but the words trembled. My father looked at him, his gaze not angry, but filled with contempt. Misunderstanding? He let out a short, humorless laugh. Do you think I've lived this long just to be outsmarted by you? The words landed like a sledgehammer. The hall buzzed with whispers. Isabel, standing beside Julian, gripped her wedding dress. Sir, what do you mean by that? Her voice was faint, all the confidence she'd had walking down the aisle completely gone. My father didn't even glance at her. He turned to the lawyer. Show them. The lawyer nodded. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Then, a large LED screen behind the stage flickered to life, startling everyone. On the screen, a series of images appeared. Photos, text messages, wire transfers, invoices, and audio recordings. Julian's voice, crisp and clear, filled the hall. Just keep transferring the assets into my name. After the divorce, she won't have a thing. The ballroom erupted. Oh my God, that's despicable. He planned it all from the beginning. Stop it, Julian screamed. But it was too late. Another recording played. This time Isabel's voice. Just be patient a little longer, honey. As soon as she signs the last paper, we'll get married. Isabel froze. No, that's not. That's not me. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over her gown. The guest's chatter grew louder. So she really is the other woman. What an actress. I've never seen a wedding like this. Julian lunged toward the lawyer. Where did you get this? The lawyer replied calmly. We are merely presenting the truth. My father then spoke, his voice low but each word ringing like a nail being hammered into a coffin. The things you thought were secrets? I've known about them for a long time. Julian spun around. Mr. Peterson, were you spying on me? My father shook his head. I was just observing. He took another step forward. You thought you were clever, but you forgot who you were dealing with. The silence was terrifying. Isabel was now on the verge of a full-blown meltdown. Julian, say something. This is all fake, right? Julian didn't answer, because he knew it was all real, and there was no way to deny it. The lawyer turned to the final page. We have one more announcement. The hall held its breath. Based on the entirety of the evidence and legal documentation, we are officially demanding the revocation of control over the mansion. No, Isabel shrieked. Simultaneously, the lawyer continued, and we are proceeding with a lawsuit for fraudulent conveyance of marital assets. Julian stood motionless. The ring slipped from his hand and clattered onto the floor. The small tink sound echoed in the silent room like a full stop. Guests began to stand up. Some shook their heads, some pulled out their phones to record, others whispered among themselves. The dream wedding had become a public farce. Isabel looked around, her eyes wild with panic. No, I won't accept this. I can't lose everything like this. She turned on Julian. Say something. You promised me. Julian was like an empty shell. Everything had crumbled too fast. Shut up, he yelled. Why should I shut up? You dragged me into this. Isabel screamed back. You told me the house was yours. You said everything was taken care of. Julian whirled on her, his eyes filled with rage. And you're so innocent? If you hadn't been pressuring me, do you think I would have rushed things like this? So now you're blaming me. Do you think you're some kind of saint? They started arguing. Right there on the stage, in front of hundreds of guests. The beautiful white wedding dress now looked ridiculous. The love they had once flaunted was exposed as nothing more than a series of calculations. I stood below, watching it all quietly. No joy, no satisfaction, just a calm detachment. My father turned and looked at me. His expression softened slightly. Without a word, I understood. It was over. Before leaving, my father stopped. He looked at Julian one last time. Remember this, he said, his voice low. The price of underestimating people is always higher than you think. He turned and walked away. I followed behind him. The chaotic sounds continued, but I didn't look back. Because this time, I wasn't the one being left behind. That night, I didn't look back. The hotel doors closed behind us, and the noise faded away. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp, a sensation I hadn't truly felt in a long time. I stood still for a few seconds, taking a deep breath. My chest no longer felt heavy, no longer suffocated like it had been for days. My father stood beside me, hands clasped behind his back, looking straight ahead. How do you feel? He asked. I managed a small smile. Tired, but light. He nodded. That's good enough. We didn't say anything more, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt protected. 3 days later, news of the disastrous wedding was everywhere. It didn't need the press. The videos recorded by the guests were enough to make the story the talk of the town. Groom exposed at his own wedding. Mistress's true colors revealed. $15 million mansion seized. Everyone who heard it shook their heads. Everyone who watched it gossiped. Julian's name was no longer associated with successful entrepreneur, but with a single word: greed. Julian's company began to have problems. Partners withdrew. Contracts were canceled. The people who had once praised him now fell silent or turned their backs. One morning, he walked into his office. The employees no longer greeted him. There were only averted eyes and whispers behind his back. Is that him? I heard he's about to be sued. Serves him right. Julian clenched his fists, but could do nothing. He knew everything was slipping through his fingers. As for Isabel, she moved out of the mansion 2 days later, not voluntarily, but because she was forced to. The house was seized, everything inside inventoried. She stood at the gate, a suitcase by her side, not a trace of her former pride on her face. The wedding dress was now just a humiliating memory. "Julian, what are we going to do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Julian stood silently, not answering. "Say something," she nearly screamed. He turned, his eyes cold. "You're on your own." One sentence. It severed everything. Isabel froze. You're leaving me?" Julian gave a hollow laugh. "You think I'm in any position to take care of anyone else?" She stumbled back, tears streaming down her face. "You promised me." "Enough." Julian turned and walked away without a second glance. In that moment, Isabel understood that what she had called love was just a transaction, and when she no longer had any value, she was discarded. And me? I started over, quietly, without fanfare, one step at a time. My father brought me back to the company we had once built together from the ground up. But this time, I wasn't standing in the background. I was taking my own place. "It's your decision now," my father said. "From now on, you don't need to hide behind anyone." I looked at him and nodded. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work. But it was no longer a blind effort. It was a clear-headed focus. I reviewed all our old clients, reconnected with every partner. The people who had worked with me before still trusted me, because they knew who had really done the work. Within 2 weeks, I had secured 3 major contracts. The company was back in business, without Julian, without anyone. One afternoon, I sat in my new office. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting a warm glow on my desk. I looked outside. The sky was clear and blue, no longer the oppressive gray of the day. I walked out of the courthouse. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Eleanor, can we meet?" I looked at it. I didn't need to guess who it was. I didn't reply. I just deleted the message and put my phone down. Gently, decisively. That evening, I went home. My father was sitting in his usual spot, drinking tea. I sat down across from him. "Are you okay?" he asked. I smiled. "I'm okay." He nodded, not asking for more. But his eyes were full of a gentle relief. I looked up at the night sky, and a thought crossed my mind. If I hadn't taken that wedding invitation, if I hadn't gone, if my father hadn't said that one sentence, I might still be that woman, crying in her car. But I wasn't her anymore. Some losses aren't endings. They're life's way of forcing you to wake up. 3 weeks after the night a wedding became the city's biggest joke, my life was slowly getting back on track. But it was no longer my old life. There were no more mornings spent rushing to prepare things for someone else. No more dinners spent waiting for someone who would never come home on time. No more feelings of fear and suspicion, followed by me trying to convince myself that everything was fine. I woke up every morning for myself, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt light. That morning, sunlight filtered through the thin blinds in my office, casting a warm yellow glow on my desk. The space was quiet, filled only with the soft click of my keyboard and the rustle of papers. I was reviewing a new contract, a big project, the kind I used to only support from the sidelines. Now, I was the one making the decisions. A soft knock came at the door. "Eleanor?" It was the receptionist. "There's someone here to see you." I didn't look up right away. "Who is it?" There was a slight hesitation. "He says his name is Julian Vance." The pen in my hand stopped. Not out of pain or surprise, but a strange sense of detachment. Like hearing the name of a stranger I had known a long, long time ago. I took a shallow breath and said, "Send him up." The door opened. Julian walked in. But the man standing before me was not the man I had once loved. The impeccable exterior was gone, along with the confident air. His shirt was wrinkled, his collar slightly askew. His hair was no longer perfectly styled, and his eyes were sunken and dark, as if he hadn't slept in nights. He stood there, not daring to step further, not daring to sit, just looking at me. "Eleanor." His voice was hoarse. I looked up, meeting his gaze. My expression was calm and undisturbed. "Lake, can I help you?" A simple question, but it was enough to make him freeze. Because he realized I no longer looked at him the way I used to. There was no gentleness, no expectation, only distance. He swallowed hard. I wanted to talk to you." I nodded slightly. You're talking. He stood silently for a few seconds, as if gathering all his courage. Finally, he said, I've lost everything. I didn't react. He laughed, a twisted, broken sound. The company is nearly bankrupt. All the partners backed out. I couldn't keep the house. He looked down at his hands. I have nothing left. I remained silent. Not because I was cold, but because I no longer felt the pain. He looked up, and for the first time, his eyes showed a genuine weakness. Eleanor, I was wrong. The room was so quiet you could hear every breath. I asked, what do you want? The question seemed to throw him off. He probably expected me to ask why, or how could you? But no, I no longer needed the answers. He took another step. I want to come back. I looked at him for a long time, as if looking at a piece of my own past. Then, I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, but a laugh of finality. Come back? I repeated. Do you remember? The day you handed me your wedding invitation. My voice was soft, but each word cut through the air. You stood in front of me and told me I should come and celebrate with you. He bowed his head, unable to meet my eyes. I got up from my desk and walked toward him, stopping about a yard away. I looked straight into his eyes. Do you remember what you said? He was silent. I continued. You told me, you've lost. A heavy pause. I tilted my head. So why are you coming back now? He couldn't answer. He just stood there, a man utterly exposed. I let out a soft sigh, my voice slowing. You didn't lose everything because of me. I looked him square in the eye. You lost everything because of you. He closed his eyes, his shoulders trembling. I turned my back, not wanting to see any more. Leave. My voice was quiet but absolute. He stood there for a long time, as if wanting to say more. But in the end, he said nothing. He just turned and walked away, silently. The door closed without a sound, but it felt like a chapter of my life had closed completely. I stood still for a moment, looking out the window. The city was still noisy. People were still moving. Life was still going on. No one stops for a broken marriage. And no one could live my life for me. I smiled faintly, but it was genuine. Some people come back not because they still love you, but because they couldn't find anyone better. But by then, you are no longer the one waiting for them. The door closed, making no loud sound, but inside me, it felt as if something had been sealed shut forever. I stood still for a few seconds, no tears, no shaking, no regrets. I just let out a long, slow breath, so light that it surprised even me. I once thought that if Julian ever came back and said, I was wrong, I would surely feel pain, hesitate, or weaken. But no, the moment had happened, and I realized something. Love can be very deep, but when it's been hurt enough, it can also die very, very quietly. I returned to my desk, sat down, and opened the contract I had been working on. The numbers, the clauses, the clear, black and white text, it was all real. Unlike love, it didn't lie, didn't betray. There was only right or wrong. I picked up my pen and signed my name. A decisive signature, just like how I had just closed the door on my past. That afternoon, I left the office earlier than usual. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted to go somewhere. Alone, I drove slowly through familiar streets. I passed the coffee shop where Julian and I had once sat for hours. I passed the street with our first furniture store. I passed places that were once filled with memories. But strangely, I no longer felt pain. It was just a distant feeling, like watching someone else's story. My car stopped in front of a small park. I got out. The evening breeze was gentle, carrying the scent of grass and the last rays of sunlight. A few children were playing, some elderly people were chatting on a bench, and couples were strolling by. Life was so ordinary, yet it made me feel a sense of peace. I sat down on a park bench, just watching the world go by. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about the past, not about Julian, not about what I had lost. I was only thinking about how I wanted to live my life from now on. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a message from an ex, but from a business partner. Today's project went very well. I'd like to discuss a long-term partnership. I smiled, a small but real smile. That evening, I went home. My father was still sitting in his usual spot. His teacup was still warm. He glanced at me. You saw him? I nodded. Yes. And? I sat down, silent for a moment, then said, I have nothing left to say to him. My father looked at me, saying nothing, but his eyes were a confirmation. I had moved on. After a while, he asked, Are you angry? I thought about it. then shook my head. No. And I don't hate him, either. I gave a small laugh. We're just no longer connected. My father nodded. Then you understand. I looked at him. Understand what? He took a sip of tea, his voice low. What people do to you is their business. Whether you let it affect your life or not, that's your business. I was silent. The words were simple, but they felt like they opened a door in my mind. That night, I lay in bed, not scrolling through my phone, not overthinking. I just stared at the ceiling and realized I was no longer afraid of being alone. I used to think a woman needed a family, a husband, someone by her side to be considered whole. But now I understood. Wholeness is when you no longer depend on anyone else to feel complete. Somewhere else. Julian sat alone in an empty room. No voices, no bright lights, only darkness. He looked at his phone. No new messages. No one was looking for him. For the first time, he understood the feeling I had once endured. As for me, I closed my eyes and fell into a deep sleep. No dreams, no worries, just peace. Some breakups don't need tears. They just need one person to keep walking forward and never look back. After that meeting, Julian never came back. But that didn't mean things stopped. On the contrary, they were just beginning. 3 days later, news spread through the business community. Julian's company was officially under financial investigation. It was no longer a rumor or a warning. It was real. Accounts were audited, contracts were scrutinized, and shady money transfers were slowly brought to light. The things he once thought were clever maneuvers had now become evidence against him. In his old office, the atmosphere was grim. Employees huddled in corners, whispering, "Heard we're closing down soon. I don't even know if we'll get paid this month. I'm already looking for a new job." Julian walked in. No one greeted him. No one stood up. There were only furtive glances before people turned away. He stood in the middle of the room, feeling for the first time like a stranger in the place where he had once been the boss. Just then, the door burst open. Isabel walked in, no announcement, no knock. Her face was no longer weak, but tense. "Julian," she snapped. "We need to talk." Julian frowned. "What are you doing here?" "I'm not here to ask you anything. I'm here to tell you." She strode to his desk and threw a stack of papers down. "See for yourself." Julian opened it. Within seconds, his face changed. "This." Isabel crossed her arms, her voice cold. "The money you transferred to me, you listed it as a media partnership." She scoffed. "Do you think the investigators are stupid?" The tension was immediate. Julian clenched the papers. "What do you want?" Isabel looked him straight in the eye. No longer cooing or pretending. Only practicality remained. "I don't want to be involved in your mess." "So what? You have to fix this." "Fix it how?" She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You take all the blame." Julian froze. What did you say?" "You take full responsibility," she said, enunciating each word, "so that I don't get dragged down with you." Julian let out a bitter laugh. "Do you think I'm an idiot?" Isabel shrugged. "If you don't, we both go down." A cold, sharp sentence. Julian looked at her, and, for the first time, he saw this woman clearly. She had never loved him. On my side of things, I was in an important meeting. Across from me sat a group of investors. One of them spoke. "We've been following you for a while now, Miss Peterson." I looked up. "Yes? We want to invest in your company." I paused for a second. "You mean?" "We want a long-term partnership. Not just for one project, but for the entire system." My heart pounded, but I kept my composure. "Why me?" The man smiled slightly. "Because you were the only one in that whole story who didn't fall apart." His words silenced me for a moment. Then I nodded. "Then let's begin." That afternoon, I stood in front of a new building, a bigger office, a bigger opportunity. I remembered the days I had stood behind Julian, thinking his success was our success. But now I understood. What is truly yours will eventually find its way back to you. That evening, my phone buzzed. Not from Julian, but an unknown number. "Eleanor." "It's Isabel." I looked at it, not replying. Another message popped up. "I need to see you. It's important." I put the phone down, not rushing. I knew that when people started seeking you out, it meant they had no other way to go. Somewhere else, Julian sat alone. In front of him were legal papers. Behind him, a collapsing company. And before him, a woman ready to push him off the cliff. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he knew what it felt like to be cornered. And me? I looked out at the brightly lit city. No fear, no weakness. Just a clear path ahead, a path I had chosen for myself. When everything falls apart, people show their true nature, and it's in that moment that you find out who you really are. I didn't reply to Isabel's text right away. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I knew that when people reach out in her situation, they have nothing left to lose. 2 days later, I agreed to meet her. Not at a fancy restaurant or an office, but a small, quiet coffee shop where every word could be heard clearly. Isabel arrived early. When I walked in, she was already there. No beautiful dress, no perfect makeup, just a tired woman with dark circles under her eyes and a tense expression. She stood up. "Eleanor." I sat down. "Go ahead." No small talk, no pleasantries. She looked at me for a few seconds, as if gathering her courage, then opened her purse and took out a USB drive. She placed it on the table. "Everything is on here." I didn't touch it. I just asked, "Everything what?" Her voice trembled. "Everything Julian did." The air grew still. "He didn't just transfer assets," Isabel continued. "He used fake contracts to embezzle money from the company." I looked at her, not surprised, but I still felt a chill. "How long have you known?" She lowered her head. "For a long time." "Then why are you telling me this now?" Isabel laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "Because now I'm the one being abandoned." Her honesty was so raw it silenced me. She looked at me, her eyes no longer filled with pretense. "You want revenge, don't you?" I shook my head. "No." She was taken aback. "No? I don't need revenge." I looked her straight in the eye. "Someone like him reaps what he sows." Isabel was silent for a moment. Then, she said something that changed the atmosphere. "But you're the only one who can decide how much he has to reap." I paused. I picked up the USB drive. It felt light in my hand, but heavy with consequence. I knew that on it was not just data, but the fate of a human being. At that same moment, somewhere else, Julian was being questioned. The meeting room was cold, the lights were white, and across from him sat two investigators. One of them said, "Do you have anything to add, Mr. Vance?" Julian was silent, his hands clenched, sweat trickling down his temple. "We already have some evidence," the other one continued. "But if you cooperate, things could be different." He swallowed hard. "What evidence?" The man looked at him, didn't answer, and just said, "You should think carefully." Back at the coffee shop, Isabel stood up. "I've told you everything." She looked at me. "The rest is up to you." I didn't stop her, didn't say anything more. I just sat there, looking at the USB drive on the table. After a moment, I picked it up and put it in my bag. I didn't open it. Not yet. That evening, I went home. My father was in his usual spot. He looked at me. "Something's on your mind." I placed the USB drive on the table. "I have this." He didn't ask what it was. I continued. "I can make him lose everything. Or I can go easier." My father took a sip of tea. "What do you want?" That question made me silent for a long time. I used to think that if this day ever came, I wouldn't hesitate. I would make him pay tenfold. But now, I wasn't so sure. I looked at my father. "I don't know." He nodded. "It's normal not to know. So what should I do?" He set his teacup down and looked at me. "Don't make a decision based on emotion." A simple piece of advice, but it was enough. That night, I sat alone, my laptop open, the USB drive plugged in. All it would take was one click. But I stopped. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and finally, a small smile touched my lips. I shut down the computer. The next morning, I made a call. "Mr. Evans, I have something for you." The other end was silent for a few seconds. "Understood." I continued. "Handle it by the book. No more, no less." Elsewhere, Julian received a new notice. He read it, his hands shaking. This time, there was no way out. And me? I walked outside. The sun was bright and clear. I didn't need revenge. I just needed justice. A strong person isn't someone who seeks revenge, but someone who is clear-headed enough not to become just like their enemies. A week after I handed the USB drive to the lawyer, things began to move. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but with precision. That morning, as I sat in my office, my phone vibrated. A short text from Mr. Evans. "It's done." Just 2 words. But I knew everything had reached its final stage. That afternoon, the news came out not as a rumor or a story, but as an official conclusion. Julian Vance was found guilty of financial misconduct. The illicit transactions were exposed. The sham contracts were unraveled. The company officially ceased operations. There was no dramatic scene. No one witnessed it directly, but everyone in the industry knew. He was finished. In another corner of the city, Julian sat alone in a small room. No more mansion, no more big office. Just an old desk, a chair, and a man with nothing left. He held the official notice, reading it over and over, but nothing could be changed. His hand trembled, then fell limp. His eyes were empty. His phone lit up, not a message from me, or from anyone he knew. It was a final notification from the bank. Account frozen. He laughed, a dry, hollow sound. No more anger, no more resentment, only regret. At the same time, Isabel also got the news. She stood in front of her small, rented room, staring at her phone, her face pale. "No, it can't be," she muttered. The phone slipped from her hand. She sank to the ground, tears streaming down her face. No one was beside her, no one to lean on. The man she had once trusted to give her a new life could no longer even save himself. As for me, I received the news in silence. No celebration, no satisfaction. I just gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging something that was meant to happen. That afternoon, I left the office early. Not because I was busy or tired, but because I wanted to go somewhere. I drove back to the old mansion. The gates were closed. No lights on, no people inside. Just a silent, empty space. I stood in front of it for a long time. Old memories flickered past the day we first moved in. The dinners, the arguments, the times I had tried so hard to hold on to something that was already gone. I smiled. No sadness, no regret, just a light feeling of gratitude. "Thank you," I whispered, not sure who I was talking to. Maybe to the past. I turned and walked away, not looking back. That evening, I went home. My father was there, as always. He looked at me. "It's over." I nodded. "It's over." He didn't ask for more. He just took a sip of tea and said, "How do you feel?" I thought for a moment, then answered, "I feel light." He nodded. "That's enough." I sat down next to him, looking out at the front yard. The wind was gentle, the trees swayed. Everything was so normal. But I knew my life had turned a new page. I was no longer a woman living for someone else, no longer someone who put her trust in the wrong place, no longer someone afraid of loss. I was someone who knew her own worth. That night, I slept deeply. No dreams, no worries. Just true, profound peace. Justice may come late, but it never forgets. 1 year later, the city was the same, people rushing, lights shining, life moving on. But for me, everything was different. I stood at the window of my new office, high floor, clear glass, a panoramic view of the city below, a project just signed, a major contract just completed. My work was stable, my life was balanced. Gone were the days of chasing after someone. Gone were the sleepless nights over a man who wasn't worth it. I had rebuilt everything myself, slowly but surely. The office door opened gently. A young employee walked in. "Eleanor, the meeting with the new partners is this afternoon." I nodded. "Okay. Please prepare the materials for me." "Of course." She smiled and walked out. I watched her go, and suddenly realized I had become the person I once admired, not for the money, but for the resilience. That afternoon, on my way home from work, I stopped at an old coffee shop. The place hadn't changed, the same table, the same corner. Only the person sitting there was different. I ordered a coffee and sat alone. Not sad, not lonely, just at peace. I remembered sitting in this very spot, years ago, waiting hours for Julian, only for him to say, "I'm busy," and I would accept it. I used to think love meant endurance, sacrifice, turning a blind eye. But now I knew. The right kind of love doesn't make you feel small. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. Just one line. "I'm starting over. I don't need you to come back." I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry." I looked at it, not surprised, not moved. I just read it and turned off the screen. I didn't reply. There was no need. Some apologies no longer have any meaning. In another part of the city, Julian was working in a small retail store. No more suits, no more luxury cars. Just an ordinary man. He worked in silence. No one knew his past. And perhaps that was the greatest punishment of all. As for Isabel, I heard she had left the city. No one knew where she went. No one cared. Because those who choose the wrong path eventually have to walk it alone. That evening, I went home. My father was there, with his familiar cup of tea. He looked at me. Things going well lately? I smiled. Very well, Dad. He nodded, not asking for more, but his eyes were filled with a complete sense of peace. I sat down beside him. We were silent, not needing to say anything to understand each other. I looked out at the yard. The wind was gentle. The trees rustled. A feeling of tranquility washed over me. I realized I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I didn't need to show anyone I was successful. I didn't need to show anyone I was happy. Because I truly was okay. I stood up, went to my room, and looked at myself in the mirror. Not the girl from long ago, not the betrayed woman, but a better version of myself. I smiled, a small but real smile. Some people leave so you can realize your own worth. Some falls aren't meant to break you, but to make you stand up stronger. And sometimes, winning isn't about making someone else lose. It's when you no longer need them in your life at all. In this life, not everyone who betrays you does so because they are stronger. Sometimes, they have simply chosen the wrong way to live. What you lose is not always a disadvantage. Sometimes, it's a way for you to see clearly who deserves to stay. The man who betrayed you ultimately lost everything. The woman who inserted herself into another's happiness ultimately paid the price. And as for you, if you are strong enough to walk through the pain, you will realize something very important. Not everyone who leaves you is a loss. Sometimes, it is a liberation, and sometimes, the ultimate retribution isn't you getting revenge, but you living a better, happier life, forcing them to look back at themselves. If you found this story meaningful, please subscribe so you don't miss our next compelling and profound story. Press the like button to support the channel, and don't forget to leave a comment. What do you think of this ending? What would you have done if you were the main character? Please share this video with your friends and loved ones. Perhaps they, too, need a story like this to become stronger. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next story.